This is an overview of Alpine Ascent's 3-day climb of Mount Baker via the Easton Glacier. So you can see we're checking out a top-down view of Mount Baker situated in the North Cascades. Big active stratovolcano. It's just under 11,000 feet tall, 10,781 feet. And hopefully in a couple of days here, you will be standing on top of Mount Baker. So let's start at the trailhead. This area is called Schreiber's Meadow. This is where the road ends. There's lots of parking up here, so you've got to find a spot towards the weekends. Things are a little bit busier, so you just need to look around for a good spot to park your vehicle. We meet up at the trailhead bathrooms. So you can see just to the left of that little yellow pin, that's where the trail starts. That's where the bathrooms are. It's an easy spot to find. And at the trailhead, what we do here is make sure that we've got the right footwear on, depending on the season. That's going to be either approach shoes or mountaineering boots. And then we make sure our packs are all rigged up. We make sure we have all of our sharps and everything that we need to climb the mountain. Make sure our water's filled up, etc. From Schreiber's Meadow, starting at about 3,300 feet, we cruise through some really mellow terrain. You can see this big, kind of broad, open river valley, a bunch of meadows. It's a really pretty area. Often late in the summer, we get blueberries along the trail, which is pretty cool. And we head all the way up to the crossing of Rocky Creek. And most of the year, there's actually a metal footbridge in that crosses one of the better spots on this creek. We still take it really slowly, one at a time. There's no reason to roll an ankle on this creek crossing. So once we've crossed the creek, we're going to actually go ahead and shift our perspective here a little bit. You can see we start heading uphill proper. So there's sort of one really big treed hill with a bunch of switchbacks in it. And we cruise from Rocky Creek, which is only about 3,700 feet, up to the top of this hill at about 4,600 feet. Somewhere just before the top of this, typically we'll take a break in a nice shaded area in the trees so that we stay cool. Around 4,600 feet, we break out and actually see some really nice views. And you can start to see some of the topography just kind of up and right of our yellow Meadow Views pin. You can start to see what's called the railroad grade. So the railroad grade is the lateral moraine of the Easton Glacier. And let's go ahead and just look a little further north here. You can see the trail. And you can start to see this funny feature just carving out the middle of our view. This is where the Easton Glacier has retreated, leaving big, steep sidewalls. And so eventually, as we're climbing, we actually walk right along the top of the railroad grade. You can sort of get a sense from this view. This is a big valley that's been carved out by this glacier, and we walk right along the left or the western edge of it. It's a really cool spot. You can actually see some great views up towards Mount Baker. You can look almost 360 degrees around. It's a really, really, really great spot. From the railroad grade, we head all the way up and up. We start to get some snow, and we head all the way to our camp. So we camp outside of the main area where most climbers choose to camp. This gives us a little bit of privacy and gives us some really lovely views, especially out to the west. We're going to go ahead and zoom out here. So from our spot perched at about 6,200 feet, we can see all the way out to the water, all the way out to the Puget Sound to our west. And we can see pretty far to our east as well, kind of out towards the Cascades. We're also seated right at the base of Mount Baker, and so we can look up and sort of see the terrain that we're gonna cruise through over the next day or so. So getting to camp from 3,300 feet at Schreiber's Meadow to our camp at about 6,200 feet typically takes us around 3 hours. Could be a little more, could be a little less, just depends on the group, and that's in line with what you've read in your training materials. We like to climb for about an hour, about 1,000 feet of vertical gain, and then we stop and we take a break. So we do this a leg at a time, and we get to camp usually sometime in the early to mid-afternoon. Depending on the weather, there's one of two climbing options. So on this 3-day trip, we have the option to climb on day 2 or day 3. And what we're going to do is just assess how everybody's doing, how the weather is, and what makes the most sense to give us the best chance of summiting. So if we're going to climb to the summit on day 2, then we need to learn how to travel safely on the glacier on day 1. So what we'll do if we're taking that itinerary is we'll do snow school. Um, Once we've arrived to camp after a little bit of a break, we'll learn how to walk on a rope. We'll learn how to do cramponing skills. We'll learn how to do self-arrest. Really, the whole toolkit we'll need to safely climb up to the summit. Obviously, we'll have dinner, try to get a good night's rest, and then the next morning we'll head towards the summit. The other option, if the weather necessitates it, we might take a nice long rest into day 2 and spend most of day 2 doing a really, really robust snow school. So that's going to do the same thing. It's going to set us up really well to climb to the summit on day 3. And if we opt for that, we usually like to end the day pretty early and try to get a good rest. We usually start a bit earlier if we're summiting on day 3 to give us enough time to get all the way up and all the way back out. Regardless, when we head for the summit from camp, what we're going to do, let's go ahead and zoom in. We're going to ascend this patchy snow, kind of gaining the Easton Glacier at the safest point. So sometimes that means we walk all the way up to, you can sort of see a notch where the rock is meeting the Easton Glacier there. Or sometimes we'll just hop over the ridge right onto the Easton Glacier. We pick whatever route is safest. So once we've gained the glacier, we're all roped up. We start heading up this really big area. You can see the red pin of the Easton Glacier and the red pin of the Sherman Crater. That's where we're headed. And the route we take through this glaciated terrain really depends on the year. It depends on the week. It depends on the day. So we'll pick whatever's a good, safe, efficient route, and we'll head uphill. Similar to how we climbed on our first day, we'll try to walk for about an hour, about 1,000 feet of vertical gain, and we'll head all the way up to the edge of the Sherman Crater. So the Sherman Crater is situated below the summit of Mount Baker and is the active crater on Mount Baker. So it's constantly steaming. There's a little bit of a sulfury smell, and you can see that yellow pin. We take a break at the crater rim. It's a great spot to take a break. You can see down into the crater. Really interesting views. Usually takes us a couple of hours to get up here to the crater. Go ahead and shift our perspective here. So from the crater rim, we do our last push to the summit. It's usually about an hour or so from the crater rim to the summit. And we climb up something called the Roman Wall. So it's one of the steeper sections that we'll climb on this trip. It's not too crazy. If it is extra steep, we'll make sure that we're using pickets or another form of running protection to make sure that we're safe if somebody should slip. So we head all the way up the Roman Wall to the summit plateau. Shift our perspective again here. And once we've gained the top of the Roman Wall, it's just kind of a flat walk over to the summit. So a really cool spot from the summit. I'm going to zoom way out here and just show you what you're going to be able to see. So from the summit, you can see out to Mount Shuxin. You can see out into the North Cascades, into this really beautiful region of remote mountainous wilderness. So once we've reached the summit, obviously we've got to descend. We've got to descend all the way back down to camp. So this whole time, whether it's day 1, day 2, day 3, if we are moving, we are eating and drinking and making sure we're taking good care of ourselves. So we're reapplying sunscreen when we need to. We're dealing with hot spots or blisters when we take a break, etc. And that's especially important on the descent from the summit back to camp. So we descend back to camp after summiting, and depending on our itinerary, whether we're climbing for the summit on day 2 or day 3, we'll either come back, celebrate, and enjoy a good night's rest at camp before our exit on day 3, or we'll descend to camp, take a little bit of a break, repack our backpacks, and then head from camp all the way back down to Shriver's Meadow. So it's very doable either way. There are advantages to both itineraries. And that's our climb.